Despite all this going on right now, the legal pushback DOGE is facing, it is moving forward with its different investigations, and right now they're planning to audit the IRS. The DOGE department is moving forward with its audits and its reviews of government agencies on that. And meanwhile, Trump and his team are facing a growing list of legal challenges right now, as we mentioned. Many of Trump's policies are now being blocked by judges throughout the country, and Trump has now responded to the pushback. We'll be talking about these topics and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, first off, folks, on the DOGE audit. Despite the legal pushbacks DOGE is facing, the DOGE department is moving forward with audits and reviews of government agencies. And now, just in time for tax season, DOGE staff have now arrived at the headquarters of the IRS. The Federal Tax Collection Agency is now facing an investigation into any potential waste and also a review of its practices. And look, reports began circling last week after DOGE staff were seen at the IRS building, and this was followed by a public announcement on the upcoming actions from President Donald Trump. The Blaze wrote this. It said, two unnamed sources said to be familiar with the matter told Reuters that one of Elon Musk's top DOGE staffers, Gavin Kliger, arrived at the IRS Thursday to scrutinize the agency's operation. And it said that Kliger reportedly met with top executives at the agency who were separately instructed in an email to identify all non-essential contracts for termination. And noted this, quote, consistent with the goals and directives of the Trump administration to eliminate waste, reduce spending, and increase efficiency, GSA, General Service Administration, has taken the first steps in a government-wide initiative to eliminate non-essential consulting contracts, said the email. And notes that according to CNN, Kliger apparently asked for a description of what each business unit in the agency did. What are y'all doing here, right? And what it sought to accomplish in the next 90 days and what risks it currently faces. And it notes that despite the straightforward nature of the DOGE members' questions, Kliger's visit reportedly left IRS staffers on edge. I wonder why. It notes as well that Trump suggested that he does not plan to shutter the IRS, but noted the agency will be looked at like everybody else, meaning they're going to investigate just like every other agency. Now look, on that point, one of the many questions we may soon have the answer to is whether the Biden administration actually hired 87,000 new IRS agents and whether they were actually given firearms training. Now look, we might remember stories on this were making the rounds back in 2022, but the kind of left-wing news outlets, they were saying the whole thing was fake. It's all fake news, they said. Although they did allege that the new funding under the Biden administration, right, that the agency could hire between 20,000 and 30,000 new staff. Not 67,000 or whatever, but still a lot of people. They also noted that at the time the IRS had a total staff of around 78,000 employees. Now look, the other big issue that allegedly started under the Biden administration was the use of artificial intelligence by the IRS. They started using it to basically supercharge the agency when it came to sifting through our tax returns and so on. And while it was framed as going after the wealthy, right, it's just for the millionaires and the billionaires. It actually seemed to be kind of about all of us, right? It was a lot broader than that. And some allege the level the technology could reach could even represent a breach of constitutional rights, especially when it comes to the limits on government investigations without warrants. And the Biden administration also started monitoring smaller and smaller payments for alleged fraud, like $500, right? Which could also begin raising some concerns, especially when it comes to people using like person-to-person payment apps like Venmo, if your grandma gives you birthday money or something like that, Now look, in addition to all of this, the Trump administration is right now looking to refocus some of the IRS agents, and they're going to have them work on other issues, related to illegal immigration, for example. And this could include targeting financial networks of human traffickers, drug traffickers, other criminals and organizations. And, of course, remember that illegal immigration is not just about, border and so on. It's about the actual criminals tied in with, immigrant gangs and things like that. Some IRS agents, they could also kind of get involved with this as well, deputized to help with arrest, detentions, transportation, things like that. And of course, looking at people being deported. Now, overall, though, Trump has come out fairly strongly against the current tax system, right? Back to the IRS. And if some of his discussed plans do gain ground, it's possible that the IRS, right, as it currently exists, could basically be much less capable to go after the average American. That the IRS, as it currently is, could be less needed, frankly. And Trump is suggesting using a simplified tax system with an easier kind of tier-based system. He's talking about getting rid of stacks of regulations, and the idea has even been floated to create a government online tax filing system which would make kind of external tax filing programs unnecessary. You could just use the simplified system the government has. And even beyond this, he has suggested that tariffs on foreign goods could potentially make federal income tax unnecessary for most Americans. And he has discussed creating an external revenue service, an ERS, that would manage this and would kind of, to an extent, replace the IRS as we currently know it. Now, were he to actually do this, the tax system as we know it could drastically change. It would mean, for example, that the ERS would work as kind of an external tax collection agency, not working on taking our tax dollars, right? But instead working on going after like foreign money and things along those lines. Now, in other news also, Trump and his team are facing a growing list of legal challenges right now. Many of Trump's policies are now being blocked by judges throughout the country, and there are state lawsuits coming, aiming to block some of his policies as well. There's also broad claims from Democrats that his actions to cut government spending or, shrink or eliminate entire federal agencies has created a kind of constitutional crisis. The argument on that point is they say these powers rest on Congress, not on the president. They're saying Trump does not have the power to do this, right? Now, amidst this controversy, Trump posted a statement that has been attributed to Napoleon, and here's what he wrote. Trump said, quote, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." And look, that quote has seen some mixed responses, frankly, kind of down political lines. Many of Trump's critics, they say this represents an intent to overstep the law, right? Why is Trump saying this? Does he want to violate the law? And many of his supporters are suggesting that his actions are being unjustly challenged. And yeah, he's trying to save the country, they say. But what is becoming apparent, though, is that while Trump seems to have spent a good amount of time preparing current, this onslaught of executive actions and changes that he's now rolling out within the government, many of his challengers, the people standing up against him, also seem to have come prepared with legal cases, lawsuits, and so on, everything ready to counter everything he's doing. And this is true. Even before Donald Trump won the 2024 election, there were actual public reports out in the open that Democrat strategists, legal organizations, and other groups were wargaming to prepare their challenges to the policies that Trump was campaigning on. Because remember, Trump was saying he was going to do what he's going to do, right? Take this as one example. Back in July 2024, The Guardian reported that, quote, "Washington insiders simulated a second Trump presidency. Can a role play save democracy?" they said. Now, the article noted some of the scenarios they were working on and laid out how teams were wargaming, working on different strategies to counter anything Trump may do. It noted, quote, "The scenario was imaginary, but the discussion around it was very real. Dozens of men and women in Washington, D.C. area hotel conference centers were seated at tables arranged to resemble the White House Situation Room, wearing name tags denoting the part in the role play. Prominent people from both parties were in character as the President of the United States, aka Trump, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Republicans and Democrat governors, Congress members, federal prosecutors, religious and business leaders, and community organizers. They basically role-played what the Trump administration would look like." And it added this, quote, "About 100 175 people participated in 5 exercises, bringing the process to extraordinary wealth of bipartisan institutional knowledge. And among the lineup, it says, were senior officials from successive administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration, meaning former Trump, appointees and cabinet members took part in this game to plan how to legally challenge the new Trump administration. And it said, quote, they came with a mission to war game Trump, acting up the most extreme authoritarian, quote unquote, elements of his agenda and explore what could be done should he win in November, which he did. And it's to protect democracy in the face of possible abuses of power. And it said what they discovered could be used to inform public debate and sound the alarm about what most participants agreed was a woeful lack of preparation. Now look, it turns out that scenario they alleged was unlikely has now become reality. Donald Trump is now yet again the president of the United States. And now look, we're also watching broad and immediate challenges to basically all of his policies. And of course, we see these different groups already rolling out a lot of these. We're now getting a clearer view of who Trump's challengers are and the different legal arguments of their efforts to stop Trump's budget cuts and his firings. The Daily Signal said this, quote, President Donald Trump has entered Washington like a bull in a china shop, shattering the Mandarin norms of the administrative state in order to undermine the deep state, it says, but the bureaucrats are fighting back. A bevy of leftist organizations, mostly unions and woke pressure groups, it says, have proven themselves deep state allies by filing lawsuits to block Trump's orders, and some have convinced federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions purporting to tie Trump's hands, suggesting even the lawsuits we see from these local judges are being maybe informed by these activist organizations and unions. Now it says, quote, most of the federal rules Americans must live by are not passed by Congress, but issued as regulations from one of the 438 alphabet soup agencies in the federal government, be it the ATF, the FDA, the NSA, the TSA, and so on and so forth. In 2022, for example, it says Congress passed 247 laws while agencies promulgated 3,168 rules and published 80,756 pages of those rules in the Federal Register. And what it's suggesting right now is that while the legal challenges of Trump are saying that he's undermining the constitutional system, a lot of that doesn't go through Congress in the first place. A lot of that is done through the agencies, the ones now being targeted by Trump. And when they're crying foul saying, why is Trump doing this? How is this legal? This is what he's actually going after. Now it says that according to the Constitution, those employees all answer to the president as the head of the executive branch. But thanks to public sector unions and civil service protections, the president has difficulty firing them for poor performance or insubordination. Thus, the deep state opposition to the people's elected president becomes a possibility. And that's kind of where we are now. Now, look, with this in context, what we're also seeing right now are some legal counterattacks from the Trump administration. They're pushing back as well. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that the Justice Department is now taking action against individuals who may be illegally blocking the actions of the president, especially on the issue of illegal immigration. Watch.
And that's why President Trump has directed this to stop. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois, strike one. Strike two is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next. Get ready.
Now look, in response to these counterattacks, as we're seeing right now, local officials are also pushing back. Attorneys general from 14 states have filed a lawsuit challenging the authority of Elon Musk and DOGE to access sensitive government data and exercise what they now call unchecked power. How is Trump doing this? It notes that New York Attorney General Letitia James, one of the attorney generals in that lawsuit against DOGE, and who has separately been challenging Donald Trump, and who is also now being sued by the Justice Department, you see a lot of overlap here, had this to say during a press conference on the DOGE lawsuit. Watch.
And as attorneys general, we're not going to bow to the president or to Elon Musk. It's important that individuals understand that right now Elon Musk is untethered to any accountability at all. And the fact is that they would like for us to engage in an ideological litmus test.
She goes on to say that she and others are going to continue using the legal system to block Trump's policies, and there have been multiple lawsuits like this already filed from the attorneys general from Democratic states for the most part. But on the point of the broader public, the average American people, it does seem that Trump's actions are not just getting support from his supporters, he's also getting support from swing voters. Axios said this, quote, "Every Arizona swing voter in our latest egregious Sago focus group said they approve of President Trump's actions since taking office, and most also support Elon Musk's effort to slash government. Why it matters, they say. Public opinion can constrain presidents when Congress does not, but these 11 voters, not a huge pool, but this is Axios, which leans left, all of whom backed Joe Biden in 2020 but switched to Trump last November, said they're good with Trump's aggressively testing disruptive, expansionist expression of presidential power and are piling up in court challenges." Again, that's Axios, folks, not a right-wing media by any means. Now, look, voters right now, they're going to be important. Things like this are actually important, especially as we get closer to the midterms. Republicans, as we speak, they control both halls of Congress. Democrats, they're hoping to win back some of those seats and possibly gain back at least one house of Congress. So far, though, well, it seems that could be a hard bet for them. And depending on which way, voters lean, it's also possible this could cause changes in their strategies on how they deal with Trump. Look, on the point of whether DOGE is doing something legal or not, though, by, cutting government spending and looking for waste, well, another video is now making its rounds. And this is pointing to the fact, folks, DOGE, Elon Musk and so on, this whole department, it actually goes back to the Obama administration. The original agency was the United States Digital Service, and it was created in 2014 under Obama. And people are also noting that Obama may have created the legal precedents on what DOGE is now doing. Watch.
Reform is not an option. It's a necessity.
The American people are entitled to transparency.
We can't sustain a system that bleeds billions of taxpayer dollars on programs that have outlived their usefulness or exist solely because of the power of politicians, lobbyists, or interest groups.
They're entitled to be able to figure out where their dollars are going, and they're entitled to accountability to make sure that we're using the dollars for what we said it was for.
We are going to go through our federal budget, as I promised during the campaign, page by page, line by line, eliminating those programs we don't need and insisting that those that we do need operate in a sensible, cost-effective way.
What should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody.
We hope to be instilling an entire new culture that not only our administration, but every succeeding administration will in fact pursue.
No amount of waste is acceptable, not when it's your money.
Remember also, just as context, Biden was vice president under the Obama administration. But look, more on the policy that he and Obama had. This tied in with Obama's whole program to cut waste and to streamline the functions of government. And as another reminder, this is the IBM Center for the Business of Government back in June of 2011. Way back to 2011, folks. It said, quote, President Obama issued an executive order to cut waste and streamline government and reinforce the administration's performance and management reform efforts. He also appoints Vice President Sheriff Joe Biden in charge of this new campaign to cut waste. Does that sound familiar? Well, it says this, in an executive order titled, quote, delivering an efficient, effective, and accountable government, the President, Barack Obama, appointed Vice President Joe Biden to head up the campaign to cut waste. And it says further in addition, it says the new EO executive order establishes a government accountability and transparency board modeled on the Recovery Act board, another thing he did, to provide strategic direction for enhancing the transparency of federal spending and advancing efforts to, quote, detect and remediate fraud, waste, and abuse in federal programs. It said this as well. Vice President Joe Biden addressed this latter portion of the effort in a briefing late Monday morning in 2011, and he said the new effort to cut waste will institutionalize the Recovery Act model of transparency to deter, not just detect, fraud using sophisticated tools to shine a light on fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, as a bit more on this, this is Barack Obama, 13 years ago, talking about his campaign to use the office of the president on what he called, quote, the campaign to cut waste. Watch.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. Waste we should be getting rid of even if we didn't have a deficit. We're off to a good start. Over the last 2 years, we've pulled the plug on all kinds of ridiculous practices. Apparently, the government used to overnight containers filled with nothing. Don't ask why that is. Sure, some of these cuts aren't that big, but no amount of waste is acceptable. Not when it's your money. Not at a time when so many Americans are already cutting back. Just as families are living within their means, government should too, so we can invest in the things that we know will create good jobs and grow the economy.
Now look, this is all very interesting, and why? Look, this is basically what the Trump administration is now saying as well. The legal precedence for what Trump is doing was established by Obama. Now you could argue the scale is different, but on the legal side of it, it's basically the same thing. Now look, folks, in other news, another action we're now seeing from Trump is that he has moved to fire many inspectors general. People are crying foul over this. There are legal attempts to stop him from doing it. A judge has now declined to put a stop to it. The Epoch Times said this, a federal judge on February 14th rejected an emergency bid by 8 inspectors general fired by the Trump administration to have their jobs restored. District Judge of the District of Columbia, Anna Rise, forced the attorneys of the Inspector General to drop the request for a temporary restraining order during a virtual hearing, opting instead for an expedited schedule to hear the request for a preliminary injunction. Rise, it said, expressed frustration that the plaintiff's counsel, Seth Waxman, filed suit on February 12th for the order requesting emergency same-day relief, which would have included back pay 21 days after the firing occurred, stating that her court staff was already overwhelmed with scores of other temporary restraining order requests. They're trying to block everything, but they got rejected on that point. Now look, what is very interesting though, what's being left out from this entire conversation, Joe Biden did the same thing. This is CNN. February 2021, the beginning of the Biden administration. This is what CNN said, quote, the Justice Department on Tuesday asked U.S. attorneys appointed by former President Donald Trump, again back in 2021, to submit their resignations, a turnover that spares 2 top prosecutors in Delaware and Connecticut overseeing 2 sensitive Trump-era investigations. The resignations are effective February 28th, again 2021. U.S. attorneys were told on a conference call that with Acting Attorney General Monty Wilkinson, according to 2 justice officials familiar with the matter. And it said a number of acting U.S. attorneys who are not Senate confirmed or who were appointed by the courts are expected to remain in their posts until a Biden appointee is approved by the Senate. Prosecutors were told Tuesday, 2021. And look, The Hill at the time also reported on how the Biden administration was basically doing the exact same thing Trump is now doing as well that they claim is illegal. This was also from 2021. This is The Hill. Quote, the Department of Justice, DOJ, announced Tuesday that it is beginning the process of replacing U.S. attorneys appointed by the Trump administration as President Biden, it says, again, 2021, looks to install his own picks for federal prosecutors. The turnover process is anticipated to impact 56 out of 93 U.S. attorneys across the country who will be given weeks to finish up their work. The rest are career prosecutors who are already in their jobs on an acting basis or interim U.S. attorneys. It notes further in, while the replacement of attorneys from prior administrations is common, folks, Biden's rollout is more abrupt than in past White Houses. Biden was more aggressive than others. It said former presidents Obama and George W. Bush asked U.S. attorneys to resign over a broader period of time. And it noted that former Attorney General Jeff Sessions also asked 46 Obama appointees to resign immediately, but did not do so until March 2017, meaning the Trump administration the first time around waited until March, and Biden did it faster than them. Look, I think it's a fair question. Why is it that an act that was acknowledged as being common and legal back in 2021 is now being framed as an illegal scandal? Why is that? Why is it that many news outlets that told you that back in 2021 are now claiming a scandal and a crisis are taking place as Trump does the exact same thing that Joe Biden did in 2021, and not noting the history of these policies, that many of these things happened before and that many of these exact same voices defending the actions at the time are now crying foul. This is one of the big patterns we're now watching when it comes to public discourse, frankly. And frankly, I think also this is one of the more misleading elements we see in the current news cycle. But look, in other news, folks, there are allegations right now coming out that Google has been helping the Chinese Communist Party and Russia with censorship. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. There are new allegations coming out that Google, which means YouTube and others, has been helping the Chinese Communist Party and Russia with censorship. And this includes censorship through YouTube, as I mentioned, and frankly, that could explain a lot. The Guardian said this: Google has cooperated with autocratic regimes around the world, including the Kremlin in Russia and the Chinese Communist Party, to facilitate censorship requests an observer investigation can reveal. It says the technology company Google has engaged with the administrations of about 150 countries since 2011 that want information scrubbed from their public domains. And it notes further in that after requests from the governments of Russia and China, Google has removed content such as YouTube videos of anti-state protesters or content that criticizes and alleges corruption among their politicians. Meaning, anybody who talks about corruption in China, including myself, risks getting censored by YouTube and Google. Now, notes further in, Google does not publish full data on takedown requests, but it does produce a selection of summaries about certain censorship requests it believes may be of public interest, it says. And it notes that these summaries are included in the company's transparency report, which it updates every 6 months. And analysis by the Observer of this report has revealed an opaque process for removing content and incomplete data. It raises questions, it says, about Google's role in controlling public information and in areas such as disinformation, war propaganda, and geopolitics. It also notes critics have expressed concern that Google is playing God with little oversight or regulation. Now look, on this, it raises some important questions. Just as a personal note, Crossroads, the channel you're now watching me, we're still censored by Google. We're censored by YouTube. We've been demonetized for around 4 years. They still have not even fully told us why we're demonetized. But look, who knows? Maybe we'll get some answers on that soon, right? We'll have to figure it out. Folks, that said, hit the like button, leave a comment, and let's jump into some questions. In case you didn't notice too, I'm on the road right now. I'll be traveling for the next couple weeks. Mockingjay, you said, if you read The Art of the Deal by Trump, you say Trump is absolutely relentless with court battles. It is like he's been prepared his whole life for this time. You know, it's actually interesting. That is true. I feel like Trump, let's go back in time, folks. 2024 election, leading up to it, what was happening? You had a lot of Republican candidates, right? You had, of course, Vivek Ramaswamy. You had, of course, Elon Musk was, people were pushing him, but he's not he wasn't born in the U.S. He can't run for president. People were pushing him to do something. You had, of course, Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, one of the leading candidates at the time. Trump, you had Mike Pence is one of the presidential candidates. This was kind of the lineup, right? Now, when you had these different voices coming out, Trump was kind of on the sidelines. Vivek was one of the leading candidates, and of course, Governor Ron DeSantis was kind of seen as the best possibility. A lot of people thought DeSantis was going to win. What happened though? Suddenly, out of the blue, the FBI raids Mar-a-Lago, Trump's home in Florida, right? They raid Mar-a-Lago. And as soon as that happens, Trump dominates the news cycle. And, when Trump first announced his run for president, a lot of people were not really that excited about it. Look, I'm telling you as somebody who watches metrics, I can tell you personally, when Donald Trump came out and first announced he was going to run again for 2024, a lot of people didn't care that much. I can tell you this as a content creator and as somebody who watches metrics and watches internet traffic and watches trends. The bump for Trump was very little. People did not care that much. That only changed when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. As soon as it became a court battle, Trump blew up in terms of the news. All the media focused on him. Everybody was focused on him. And then what happened? Mike Pence, Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, they had to come out and condemn the Biden administration allowing this to happen, that they would raid Mar-a-Lago. And when Ron DeSantis, kind of delayed doing that, it kind of killed his campaign. In fact, Ron DeSantis even criticized, the Biden administration of basically causing him to lose the election. There was a very strong chance Ron DeSantis could have become president. He alleges that Biden, whether he was involved or not, but the Biden administration raiding Mar-a-Lago basically pushed Trump to the forefront of the Republican Party. And so, yeah, Trump in a weird way kind of thrives in chaos. Trump really thrives when it comes to legal attacks. He really thrives when he's being challenged. When he's not in a situation like that, it's maybe arguably not as much. As funny as it is, sorry folks, we're just adjusting some stuff. And so, yeah, I do think it's the case that these court battles and Trump getting dragged into these court systems, he's kind of good at it. And I mean, case in point, remember how he handled a lot of the judges? He's kind of defiant. He just kind of violates a lot of court orders. If they put a muzzle on him, what does he do? If they tell him, you can't legally speak, Mr. President, or we're going to, charge you with contempt, what does he do? He goes on X and he insults the judge publicly. It's like he just thrives in that, basically. And when they attack him, he kind of like absorbs the energy and becomes more powerful. There are not many people like that. In fact, I can't even think of another person like that. He's very unique in that regard. And so Mockingjay, I think you're right. These court battles right now, ironically, they're probably helping Trump. And on that point too, if you actually look at the Democrat donors right now, a lot of the donors are pulling their money back from the Democrats. And if you look again at the swing voters, I showed you some of the statistics among swing voters, a lot of them support what Trump is doing. And so it is possible that because of the way that Democrats are choosing to challenge Trump, lawsuits, legal challenges, trying to block him from auditing and investigating government spending, it's not resonating with voters. It's not resonating with their donors. And frankly, they may actually be hurting themselves politically by doing what they're doing, trying to challenge Trump in this light. They might actually have to re-strategize to find something that actually works because it's not working. It seems to be having the opposite effect. Jerry, another question. You're saying, just pull all federal funding from those states that don't comply. There has been residence on this before. One example was when alcohol purchase was raised to 2021, highway funds were pulled from Louisiana. Yeah, that is something Trump is doing as well, that he's actually doing this to an extent. He's leveraging federal money to states as a way to push back against the actions against him from the state level. Now, on that point, a lot of the pushback Trump is facing is from the attorneys general. And Trump actually does have the ability to replace those people. He can't replace all of them. A lot of other pushback he's facing right now is coming from judges. But the important part with the judges, right, these Obama or Biden appointed judges in many cases, some Reagan appointed, by the way. A lot of these judges that are pushing back against Trump, as was noted in some of the reports, they're being kind of pushed to do this by activist organizations and unions. Excuse me. And so a lot of this is kind of being coordinated as well. In terms of Trump, as Jerry is noting, using federal funds as leverage to the states, one of the ironic parts is that it's actually a lot of the Democrat states that rely a lot more on federal funds. California, for example, right? It's mixed. There are some Republican states as well. But California, for example, they get a lot of government money. And you do see Trump doing that to California right now. For example, he's investigating the high-speed rail. For example, he's talking about conditions if California wants federal money to help rebuild from the fires, turn the water back on, and make voter ID a thing. And you also see him going against other things like in New York, why are you guys getting, all this money to put up illegal aliens in free apartments and free hotel rooms when you can't even afford basic things that you need government money for from the federal government? They're ending that. You see states suing on that. And even back to Mockingjay's points, when New York City or New York State sues the president because they don't want him to pool money that was going to go to put up illegal aliens, including like Tren de Aragua, in 4- and 5-star hotel rooms, how do you think the average American views that? It makes the state look bad. And ironically, when you have states suing and challenging the president of the United States, when they find, have you seen $4.7 trillion in funding that we don't even know what's for? This was a big one, folks. Part of the DOGE audits with the Treasury Department, they have found allegedly $4.7 trillion in spending that doesn't even have a description of what the money's being used for. We don't even know what they're spending our money on. $4.7 trillion. That's insane. You have, for example, the DOGE department saying they're identifying that there's like 2/3 more Social Security numbers active than there are even U.S. citizens. How is that? The number of active Social Security numbers, only 1/3 of them are actual U.S. citizens. They're alleging that our money is being taken by like foreign criminal organizations and foreign scammers. Folks, that's crazy. And so, when you have states and, again, judges trying to make it so Trump can't look at that. Hey, don't look there. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. It makes them look like they're in on it. It makes them look bad, right? And so this is what you're seeing right now. You're seeing a massive public information campaign being done right alongside these investigations. And then you see lawyers and states trying to stop the investigation as the public is being informed of what they're finding. And I would argue that's probably why Axios found that a lot of swing voters, everyone they talk to supports what Trump is doing, what Elon Musk is doing. You know what I mean? I think unless someone is deeply partisan, which there is, of course, they probably don't want that happening. And I can tell you why I think that is too. I told you I was at the barber the other day and they had, I believe it was like CBS on the TV. If you watch what a lot of Americans are being shown, if you were to just watch mainstream media, right, the big corporate media, I was watching this news broadcast about DOGE and about the investigations. They did not give a single detail of what they say they were finding. They did not talk about even a drop of fraud. They didn't talk about a single case coming out. They didn't talk about a single thing they're claiming they found. All they were telling people was that evil, orange man and, the wealthiest man alive, Elon Musk, were basically trying to shut down government funding and shut down, government agencies. That's all they were saying. They didn't give context. They didn't give any information on the claims. They gave nothing. The only thing they were saying is that they're trying to bypass Congress to shut down agencies and funding. That's all they're telling people. And so if you understand that imagine you're, just your average person and that's the only news you're seeing. And then they go and get quotes from the officials trying to block it and so on. This is a constitutional crisis. This is illegal. They think he's a criminal and they're not being told any counter arguments. That's what a lot of people see. That's all they're seeing. They're not seeing anything other than that. And so they're judging their kind of moral stance based only on the information they're being provided. Which to me is, I can understand where these people are coming from because they're being told that everything else is disinformation and far-right propaganda. You know what I mean? They label me like that. You know what I mean? And so they won't even look, some of them at least, they won't even look at counter arguments because they think it's all like, far-right propaganda or something. And that prevents them from seeing anything outside the little bubble they're in. That's the unfortunate reality of a lot of the country right now, actually. Let's see, Ashley from California, you're saying all these people crying about Elon Musk but said nothing about George Soros. So one of the funny things with this. Actually, folks, briefly on that. Yeah, George Soros. I've actually said this before. Elon Musk is basically conservative George Soros, basically. The difference being he's actually been given a government position. You know what I mean? And so, leveling with the other side, because, I have my worldviews, I have my values, I have what I think is good and bad. but I understand there are people who have different worldviews and a different outlook than I do, right? Being fair. How would I feel if like a far left billionaire like George Soros was given the ability to like audit the federal government? How would you feel, folks? Imagine Kamala Harris won the 2024 election and she appoints George Soros to lead the United States Digital Service, which is of course what Trump took and renamed as the DOGE department. George Soros is now the head of the United States Digital Service, and George Soros is going to be leading teams to audit the federal government and decide what spending is necessary and unnecessary. How would you feel? You know, understanding where other people are, I can understand where they're coming from, right? But at the same time, you know, people like myself and others, we would argue, well, you know, sure, but they're not adding programs. They're cutting programs. They're not making the government more authoritarian. They're actually eliminating a lot of government power. I think if they wanted to become, you know, the new Nazi regime, they'd probably be trying to expand their power. They'd probably be trying to like create more government agencies and more institutions and more agents and hiring more people in line with what they're doing, rather than like cutting government position, cutting government power, and cutting government spending. And so I don't think some of the narratives quite line up, although I can understand where people are coming from, right? On that point also, though, folks, we're now finding out something new when we talk about the evil billionaires trying to control our government, as a lot of the media is saying right now. We've now uncovered the greatest source of funding color revolutions, censorship, funding, for example, all the radical organizations protesting on the street, funding the very partisan organizations that are financing a lot of the activist groups. We're now finding who this person is. It is actually the American taxpayer. The American taxpayer was funding it. It turns out that our tax dollars were being used to fund most of this, and we never knew it. Lo and behold, right? That has been one of the biggest shocks, I think, for a lot of people right now. One of the biggest shocks in terms of the very tip of the iceberg we've now been able to see, even with just USAID. We're now finding that our tax dollars were being used to fund most of this stuff, including the border crisis, including all those NGOs running the border crisis, including organizations that were financing a lot of the street protests, including BLM and even some of the Gaza protests, again, under like the Tides Center and so on. That were funding, a lot of the activist groups in other areas, that were funding all these crazy foreign programs. They were funding the gender programs, the race programs, the trans programs. That was your tax dollars. We were the billionaire the entire time, funding all the stuff we were watching. And people were talking about Soros or Musk, whichever side you're on. A lot of it was just our tax dollars. Crash Bandit, you're saying, they just care about power and control. Rules for radicals. Yeah, and that's the other, again, as I briefly mentioned on that, right? I personally think that if Donald Trump wanted to become, if he wanted to climb the steps and become the new Mussolini or something like that, right? He'd probably be looking to expand government power, not reduce government power. Remember Benito Mussolini, right? The Italian dictator who was the forefather of fascism, the actual fascist party in Italy. This I've researched this stuff, right? I read part of his autobiography to research this. He was a collectivist. Mussolini was one of the most famous socialists of his time. Mussolini was a socialist. Now, you could argue he was kind of challenged by some of the other socialist organizations, but the context of that was basically a lot of communists at the time believed that communism was going to arise naturally through like a people's movement, not through like his march on Rome, for example, where he just marched and seized power. or through like even the Bolshevik Revolution, where it was the military and intelligentsia that overthrew the czarist agrarian society, which was not like an advanced capitalist society. Meaning, a lot of communists at the time basically were saying that communism doesn't work as they thought. But back to the point, Mussolini was one of the most famous socialists of his time, as was Adolf Hitler. They were socialists, and they were very famous socialists. Mussolini, in his book, his autobiography, which is, it's literally called My Autobiography, very eloquent person, right? He actually said that under the socialist state, the average citizen would not have the anti-social right to rebel against the collective. Meaning, and he also had the saying, everything within the state, nothing outside the state. Fascism, in actual practice, not in terms of name calling, because I think a lot of what we have now is just name calling. Actual fascism, in terms of actual policy, means that every single thing is under the control of the government. Meaning, people who want to expand government power to encompass everything, they are by definition doing the same thing Mussolini did with the actual fascist party. And so if somebody is trying to make it so that everything is outside the government, trying to slim down the government, trying to eliminate policies and oversight and different things like that, trying to make it so that the government is less in control of literally everything, that individual is by definition doing the opposite of fascism. And the people trying to prevent that are defending fascism in terms of actual policy, not name calling, right? Which is the real irony of what we're watching right now, I think. Nancy K., you're saying, so the IRS is going to ransack every home in America looking for gold? Really? Will they cut off fingers to take their wedding rings? Sure. Yeah, right. Briefly on that, they kind of did that after the Civil War. That was one of the big criticisms, actually, of some of the post-Civil War policies. When they created the Federal Reserve, of course, the Federal Reserve being a centralized bank under the, it's not really federal or a reserve, it's kind of outside the government, but has a government oversight. They began printing fiat currency, paper money to represent a value, which they just claim is what it is, right? They were given the ability to print more money, meaning they reduce the value of that paper money, again, while claiming that it represents the same value, sometimes meaning inflation. They created the IRS and federal income tax also around the same time. That was roughly around 1913. And also they had programs to seize gold in some cases. And a lot of people were really unhappy about that. Now, in terms of them wanting to go and like seize our gold now, I don't know if the IRS would actually do that. There are some different policies right now, some individuals talking about a return to the gold standard. In a future episode, I want to talk about Ron Paul being suggested as the individual who may get to audit the Federal Reserve. Elon Musk is talking about it. Will he get to do it? I don't know. But Ron Paul is a big advocate for a gold standard for U.S. currency. One sec. In fact, not just a gold standard. Ron Paul argues that under the Constitution, the only legal tender for the states is gold and silver. And there are, but that the states have been prevented from creating gold or silver legal tender, meaning currency, because of the Federal Reserve from the federal side of our government. Basically being blocked by the federal government from doing what they're constitutionally supposed to do, he argues, because they're deferring the printing of money to the Federal Reserve, not to the states. Now, on that point, and again, right, I'm just telling you what he is saying, right? That's what he says. There are actually movements to create gold tinder, meaning money that is actually made of gold. And I actually have some of them. There's different organizations doing it. They're just like paper-thin pieces of gold. And they're sturdy enough where they don't fall apart in your wallet. And they're functional. They actually do represent the actual tangible value of what they claim to represent. If you have a $1, gold piece, a gold, gold tinder, the actual value of gold in it is $1. If you have a $5 piece, it's actually worth $5. You have a $20 piece, it's actually worth $20 of gold. And that's the way that they do that currency. And that's what some people argue constitutionally we should have. The counter argument to that is they made constitutional amendments to change some of this. Some also question the legality of that. But we could also start getting some, if they do audit the Federal Reserve, there's a chance that they may find issues like, for example, behind-the-scenes communications on inflation, behind-the-scenes communication on whether their actions were politicized when, for example, if they were trying to undermine Donald Trump or help Obama or help Biden in terms of their control on interest rates. If they uncover corruption, that could be detrimental to the future of the Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be non-political. And that's the argument actually for having them, is they make decisions not based on politics, which is why they try to keep them separate from the federal government, and instead base it on just fiscal, whatever is best in terms of fiscal policy, meaning they look at the economy, not political situations. If they've been failing to do that, it could blow up the whole thing. And so on that point as well, we could see some big changes. Another thing I want to mention too, because there's a lot of news coming out. Trump right now, they are investigating the U.S. Treasury. And as part of that, they're also getting information on Social Security numbers. They're claiming that only 1/3 of Social Security numbers represent the actual population of the United States, meaning that 2/3 are unaccounted for. We don't even know who these people are. They're also alleging they've uncovered about $4.7 trillion in unnamed funding that has no description. We don't even know what it's for. Now, one of the big arguments from Trump and Musk is that we may have basically been paying into fraudulent systems without knowing it. And if they do find that most of our money is being spent on fraud or who knows what else, they could close that down. But the important thing on the Social Security numbers is this. Remember that the auditing of federal agencies is not important for just that agency alone. It's also important for the overlap of how one piece of information relates to another. Take, for example, and I know I want to get into some questions again, but I want to explain this because I've been thinking a lot about it. On one side, auditing, of course, Social Security numbers, finding that there's way more Social Security numbers than there are even American citizens active, and trying to find out where that money is. Why is that important? Because if they audit the IRS, what does that mean? What does that mean? You have what are possibly fraudulent Social Security numbers. They're not American citizens. Who are they? You have duplicate Social Security numbers. It turns out in the system, you could actually use the same Social Security number multiple times, unlimited apparently, according to Musk at least. What does that mean? When they audit that in relation to the IRS, well, you get information on those Social Security numbers in use. You can see how those possibly fraudulent Social Security numbers were being applied. That's the significance. And so if they look at, okay, we've now flagged 2/3 of Social Security numbers, what were they being used for? They then go to the IRS data and they see what they were being used for. That's why the personal information matters. Now, again, we'll see if they actually do carry out that line of investigation, right? We're not quite clear on whether they're going to do that, but this is something I would personally be interested in seeing. And I think even in terms of, you know, even on the Democrat side, who are trying to block a lot of this right now, even on the Democrat side, I think this would fall in their interest if they believe that everything is legal, if they believe there's no fraud, and if they believe that Trump should not be legally allowed to get private information such as Social Security numbers. If it is actually true that, again, all of this is illegal that Trump is doing, and that there's nothing to see here and there's no problems, it would be in their interest to allow that investigation to take place and make them look like the good guys. And so the question is, will they do that, right? All right, folks, it's getting a bit late. I actually have to go to an event, which is why I'm on the road right now, so I should probably end it soon. I'll do one more question, and then we'll jump. So let's see, last question. Nan's, oh, sorry, I asked that one. JA2559088. You're saying, well, we have been asking for years, how can Social Security be broke, right? Well, we are finally getting answers to those questions. That is a very important question as well. My generation, what my generation is being told, millennials, right? I'm a millennial, folks. We're being told that the older generations are using so much Social Security that by the time I retire, which will probably never happen because I enjoy my work, I'm going to be probably like Rush Limbaugh, broadcasting till the end of my days, you know, the way things are going, which I don't mind, by the way. But my generation's being told we will probably never be able to retire because Social Security is basically being eaten up. If we find that about 2/3 of Social Security is fraudulent, that's going to be a big scandal, not just for my generation, but for even people getting Social Security, because it means that your Social Security numbers, the amount you're getting, has also been eaten up by fraud, possibly. Again, that is the allegation. And something that I believe as American, taxpayers, I believe we're entitled to know this. I think we're at a stage right now where the flags that have been raised, the red flags, the fraudulent Social Security numbers, possibly, the 4.7 trillion of unknown spending, which possibly could be fraudulent. We don't know because we don't know what it's for. The billions and billions spent on crazy stuff, the 300 billion they found in like Medicare and Medicaid fraud. These now have to be addressed. If these are not addressed, people will lose faith in the institution of government. They are now in such a scenario where they have to give answers to this, or they risk losing the support of the American people. The social contract will be broken. That is the point to which Trump has pushed the United States. And on the point of the Democrat argument, we're in a constitutional crisis. Well, yeah, we're in a crisis right now because if they don't give answers to the American people on what has now been shown to the public, it will be a crisis. I think they're at a stage now, they cannot put the genie back in the bottle. They cannot put the genie back in the bottle. They need to go forward now with what they've done because they've already gone too far. And if they do not give answers on this, it will irreparably damage faith in government. And to the point of people really mad at Trump right now, I personally think this is why they're mad at him. Because he's put them in a position where they can't walk it back. They can't go back at this point. I think that is where we are now. They have to give answers to it. They have to investigate it, and they have to tell the American people what was actually taking place if they want to maintain the support of the American people. And on that point as well, I would also say that in terms of, remember we talked about polling data and swing voters and even Democrat donors. I think whoever is going to be exposed, if there is fraud that comes out, is going to look really bad if anybody is defending this. Unless it does come out that all this was legal and Trump is the one that was wrong. whoever is wrong, once the information comes out, is going to look really, really bad. And that's where we are as a country right now. All right, folks, that said, I got to get going. I have an event I have to go to. That said, folks, thank you so much for being here. I always enjoy doing these. Tomorrow I will not be able to do the show. I almost forgot. Unfortunately, because of scheduling stuff, we're not going to be able to do it. I do apologize. I will be back on Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so join us again on Thursday. I apologize again, we will not have a show tomorrow. Join me on Thursday, but in the meantime, please like this episode. Again, share it with a friend or family member. And as always, folks, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves. And as always, stay informed and stay free. Thank you.